Okay, that's good enough. Quite. So, unlike the other guys, I will not say the word Windows.
Just did.
I have swag. The other difference is that I don't get paid for what I'm doing here. I do not work for Sun. I am a member of the community. That's maybe something that makes us a little different in the OpenSolaris project, at least we like to think so. Other projects, everyone in the world is asking you, please contribute, please build a community. In the OpenSolaris project, we're pretty well leaving the guys, the marketing droids at Sun in the dust and going out and doing it ourselves because they suck.
Hold on, everyone.
Marketing people give us swag and we hand it out. Other than that, stand back, get out of the way.
I'd just like to say before he begins, I mean he has begun, but that nice little URL at the bottom, the cuddletech.com, this is the guy who writes all of the helpful little guides. Go visit his website. He's got iSCSI and all kinds of fun stuff. So, good stuff.
And it's a cuddly name.
And it's
It is a cuddly name, and it has nothing to do with the license. I registered that domain in like '98. You can check it. Everyone tried to steal it as soon as Sun decided to name their license CDDL. And suddenly InfoWorld goes, CuddleTech, new site dedicated to the license. Anyway. So, given the audience and given the number of presentations and given the fact that when Jennifer didn't actually tell me who else was speaking tonight, when I saw the speakers list, I freaked out that like I'm not a CEO or co-architect. So I tried to make this as general as possible. I wanted to demystify some of the strange or weird things that are going on right now. It's high level, we'll get through this real quick, and then we'll open it to questions, and in a community-like manner, you can save this presentation from the tear. So I'm Ben Rockwood. There you go. So has anyone not run Solaris 10? Okay, you suck. And I have DVDs for you. It's another one of our differences. Solaris 10, this is the full production Solaris 10. No demos, no evals, no BS. The real deal. We do not charge it for you. You can't even get Red Hat Enterprise Linux, the standard Linux rollout. Yes, it sucks, it's horrible, no one likes it. You can't even roll it out to test it without paying $400.
Use that house.
Come on. So, and it runs on x86 really, really, really well. So, I was the most vehement Solaris x86 hater until Solaris 10. It's much, much better now. So if you haven't tried it in a long time, try it again.
Will it run on my i386 Roadrunner?
You have a 386i, nice.
If you think you're laughing loud, wait until you try running it. So, since most everyone here has already heard features of Solaris 10, just go through them real quick. SMF is one of the greatest features for those of us in this room, system administrators. One of the features we needed for a long time is blow the old RC scripts and the old init system out of the water. It should have been destroyed 20 years ago, and I have no idea why it wasn't. Finally, people are starting to wake up to reality, and we now have replacements. Apple was one of the very first people to roll out an init replacement. Sun came along, about 4 years of development into SMF. We completely obliterate the old RC system. It's still there as legacy, but you can now manage things in a way that you previously could only do as a cluster, where you set up all of your services and you can put them in a variety of states. If a process shuts down for some stupid reason, it will try and restart it for you because it knows it should be running. If it doesn't run, say 3 times, whatever parameter you set, it doesn't try doing it again, and will very nicely tell you why it didn't run. It's not real rocket science. It just took somebody to sit down and decide to do it. Right? One of the greatest day-to-day features of Solaris 10. dtrace is the one everyone's heard about. dtrace, the lines between developer and sysadmin have kind of been blurring for years and years and years, and every year it gets a little worse. And then Linux came, and it just kind of went out the window, and suddenly sysadmins are also C programmers, and we're babysitting all the programmers all day long. And then dtrace comes along and kind of just blew whatever was left of that barrier out of the water. Now suddenly we're all kernel engineers too. But MDB sucks, and ADB is even worse. So now we have dtrace, which, as Brian was here talking earlier in the year about dtrace, more or less it allows you to ask questions to the kernel. simple questions that you've always wanted the answer to that things like vmstat, iostat didn't tell you. And it gets you out of the old sysadmin game of guessing. Because a lot of what we do on a day-to-day basis is making very educated guesses as to what's actually going on with the system. We see such and such symptoms and we know that it's more likely this, right? But we often don't have all the evidence to actually point to that. Now we can say, hey, wait a second, you're using a lot of interrupts. What the hell is actually using those interrupts? And what is it doing with them? Very, very powerful. You can use it as easily or as complicated as you kind of want to. Zones, which you heard about in the Zen presentation, abstraction. For those who want to be as simplistic as possible, yeah, it's kind of like jails, but jails done right. Everything is completely isolated. It's great for security purposes. It's great for testing purposes. It's really nice anytime you want to do anything on a system and you're afraid of blowing the system away, or if you've done any type of testing where every time you did a test cycle you felt like you had to reinstall Solaris just so you had a clean test case. It kind of gets you out of that provisioning game. The fault management architecture is one of the features of Solaris 10 that very few people talk about, and it's there, it's running, it's working, but it's a little complicated, so you don't hear a lot of advertising about it. That's the self-healing bit. It's very, very cool. You can build rule sets so that the system will respond if some type of failure occurs. If you see a certain number of errors on a PCI bus or something, it can take a PCI bus offline and do all that sort of stuff. Yeah?
Does FMA and SMF talk to each other?
Absolutely. Yes, that's one of the coolest things is that these two are absolutely integrated so that it knows that if the third NIC goes offline, you've dedicated that NIC to, you've made a dependency between that NIC and some application, say Oracle, whatever you're putting it just on an interface. It will take the application offline. The dependency is no longer fulfilled, it can't run, and so you have this great pairing between software and hardware that, again, should have existed a long time ago.
Yes.
One of the nice things is that particularly in SMF and FMA, we put all these things together using URL looking like descriptors, and it's all bridged together using pretty simple XML. So you can make the dependencies as large or small as you want to, and really kind of build out a team of how it works. The cryptographic framework I put in there because these are like the really four cool ones. The cryptographic framework is really, really nice, especially you're going to see it being used more and more in the future. If you're doing cryptology, cryptographic work, it's actually built right into the operating system. It's extremely extensible. And in new chips like Niagara, we actually have an RSA processor built into the processor, which is all used directly through the cryptographic framework. So you can do some cool things without headache of future expansion. We have full x64 support, or 64-bit x86 support, or depending on who you ask to what they want to call it. When AMD 64 came around, it finally made sense for Sun to really embrace Intel. Prior to that, it didn't really work, because as Sun customers, we've always really, really valued the fact that 64-bit, 32-bit, what do we care? Right? It all runs on Spark. It just runs. You don't think about it. It's very, very rarely a problem, especially as a sysadmin. Developers rarely see the problems either, as long as you're playing by the rules. Intel kind of blew that all out of the water because it's all 32-bit, right? And we've been living in the 64-bit world for like, what, 8, 10 years, right? When AMD finally came out and got 64-bit right, it finally made sense. So a lot of people think that Sun was really late to the x86 game. They'd been there, they just sucked at it really, really bad. Solaris 7, 8, and 9 on x86, right? If anyone in this room thinks that they were good, raise your hand. You think they were good? Okay, you
I'm still running it. I'm pretty happy with it, frankly.
You're a brave man to get a shirt. But
Hey, that sucker's been up for like 3 years.
I don't doubt that. But do you like booting it?
Sure.
The bootloader sucked.
I can tell you this. I like booting more than I like booting Linux.
The Linux bootloaders suck really bad.
That's kind of a lifestyle change.
I wasn't sure how much I could do the Linux hating thing here without getting persecuted.
It's been up for 3 years, he
Yeah.
doesn't have to worry
It
about
has.
it.
Visitor,
I'm a visitor, so I can hate Linux all I want.
Okay, cool.
Yes,
I love Linux, but I'm not running my business on it. I'll tell you that. right? Linux is great. I run it at home, or I used to run it at home.
I'm running Linux on a nice little old Spark, but I use Silo, not that.
Yeah,
Bible
I've
thing.
got a PDA that runs Linux. It's very cool, right? That will change soon when we start embedding OpenSolaris. So anyway, we've got features up the yazoo, and there's one thing you can't say about Solaris is that it's dying. Solaris 9 was a monumental step forward from previous releases. Solaris has always gotten kind of better. Each and every release has got more stable. Solaris 10 was the big revolutionary change, where we saw a huge number of features and functionality that had been in the works at Sun for 4 to 6 years. Literally, all these features have been in development for years and years and years, and finally came to a head in a single release.
You could say it much simpler by saying we've almost gotten rid of all the AT&T code.
That's a slide I took out. Because the funny thing is, and I can't say this on camera, is because I was in the OpenSolaris pilot program, I got to see the code before all the CDDL tags are put on it, and it was really cool. As an old-time Unix geek, it was really, really cool to look at the real LS, the real cat. I mean, just little simple things, but you're like, that's the AT&T one that's been around for 20 years. That is the code that's there. They just took the AT&T headers off. How that works with the licensing guys, Scott McNeely only says, don't worry about it, after having sent them a $50 million check. No one really knows how that worked. They sent them a bunch of money, and 3 months later he said, just don't worry about it. And we're not. So what is OpenSolaris? OpenSolaris is taking the code, and taking the community, people like me and people like you, and putting them together. We can glue this together with processes and subgroups and interests and all that. So you open the code, you open the processes, you make it contribution completely open, and open involvement to everyone. Whether it's somebody like me coming out and talking to all of you, whether it's talking to a kernel engineer, whether it's talking, whatever you want to do, really. There's no doors anymore. Right? There was this huge brick wall between users, customers, and Sun before, right? You got to drive by and see the sign, but that was about it, unless you were Merrill Lynch, and then you got your own kernel engineer.
Another point is that a heck of a lot of the Sun engineers are maintaining blogs that give far more information than you probably.
That's where we're getting with. So that's a huge change, right? Is now you actually, before most of us didn't actually know who the developers even were, right? There's generally one guy who's really cool, who are all BayLISA members, right? That's all of you guys. And we'd tell stories about, oh, I know the guy who wrote that, right? But it wasn't common knowledge. Now it is. D-Trace, Brian Cantrell, right? Everyone knows it. Prior to that, you know who wrote anything. There was no accountability. You didn't feel like anyone at Sun cared. It was all kind of smoke and mirrors and big corporate buildings. Now we know that they're actually passionate people about this. Yeah.
It is kind of sad though, they took Bill Joy's header, some of his comments out of the OpenSolaris code,
He swore
like
a lot.
in VI. So if you go back to the old BSD code, you can actually see Bill Joy talking crap about
If
things.
there's one thing Bill Joy isn't, it's interesting. Right? I mean, now he's. That's the funny thing, is we keep wanting to get him involved in this because everyone wants to think about Bill because they keep going back to the BSD days, and he's off like, you know, figuring out how the aliens are going to come and rearrange.
Well, no,
like,
technology's going to kill us.
Yeah, I think his last book about the apocalypse kind of freaked me out.
They sanitized a lot of the code, the comments.
They
in the
did.
code.
And that's exactly the word they used inside of Sun. In fact, it was a huge effort when, just before the code went out the door, almost every single kernel engineer inside of Sun, or anybody who knew how to work on code, was given bits of the code base, because the code base is so gargantuanly huge. And they had to go through and look for dirty words. They were thinking about /. When it happened, frankly. They were like, the /. Kiddies are going to be looking, so find it. Looking for dirty comments, things that shouldn't be there, and replacing AT&T headers or Sun headers or whatever with CDDL headers. It was a huge effort just to get that all done.
Will there be an annotated guide to the swearing and the obscenity like the Mozilla guys did before sanitizing their code?
There's very little. The first day we went open, we got a very good demo of exactly how powerful our open source, our source browser is, and that was because the /.kiddies hit it more than they hit OpenSolaris.org looking for
Everything.
Yeah. Someone actually published a list, and they were really hesitant to do that, of the words they were actually searching for because it was so vulgar. The numbers were way up there, right? It's like libm was like 7,000th on the list. A real brief history of OpenSolaris. In October '04, the pilot program opened. That was a small group of external people who were brought into the project. Prior to this, it was wholly within sight of Sun. It had been going on full speed for about a year. It had been in the works years and years prior to that. Project was codenamed Tonic, if you've ever heard it. And it kind of has been a tonic, which is the whole point. The pilot program opened. The idea was that they were going to go open, and they knew it was going to be a difficult process. They wanted to try and learn as best they could, and that meant bringing people from the outside in to help Sun through this process, through this kind of birthing process. Most of us who came in, we did not come in by invitation. We invited ourselves. When I came on board, I found out about it in Jim Grzanzio's blog. I said, if you're going to open source Solaris, I better be involved because, believe me, I'm going to be your biggest critic. So just let me on now and I'll help you fix it before I complain about it. I came on board, the first thing I did was inundated him with about 20 other guys who were longtime people in the Solaris community on the outside, and we all made his life hell. By the time we finally got to the end of the pilot, we were up to about 150 people, and Jim was turning massive amounts of people away. So this was not the typical Sun, beta, pilot, whatever, where it's handpicked because the VP shook hands with the CIO and said, you should talk to Charlie in systems, and he'll work on it. In December '04, we sent the CDDL to the OSI. Those of us in the pilot reviewed thoroughly the CDDL before it ever went to the OSI. We made several changes to it before it did. If anyone knows who York Schilling is,
Yeah.
this guy who wrote CD Record. Yeah, all of you smiling know his personality. Trust me, he gave a thorough working over to Sun Legal. So it got the Shilly action before it even went to the OSI. OSI put it out there. It was approved by the OSI in January. That made some people very happy and some people very sad. CDDL was, of course, based on MPL. No one's looking to start afresh or to prove anything, right? We want things that work. In January '05, we decided to go with a preview. So OpenSolaris.org went live. We released the full code to dtrace. This was a, look kids, we're serious, because we were dealing with a lot of people at the time who didn't believe that OpenSolaris was going to be real. Those of us in the pilot were under NDA. So we were talking to Sun a lot, but we couldn't talk to anyone on the outside about what we were doing. Releasing dtrace, which was at the time the big crown jewels of Sun, open source was really kind of a way to prove that we were serious. The CDDL also went out the door. Great thing about the CDDL going out then was Slashdot could hack it up long before we actually released the rest of the project, and it worked. In March '05, we elected our own CAB. The CAB is yet another mechanism put in place, originally thought up by Sun, ratified by the community in the pilot, to ensure that Sun does not control this. This is controlled by everyone. So the way it worked was that we were going to put 2 people from the community on it, 2 people from Sun on it, and 1 person who was the 5th seat that would be kind of a neutral open source person, which is kind of a strange concept.
Where does that 5th person come from?
It was Sun picked them. Eric Raymond was the favorite guest for a long time. The current person is the former head of the Apache Foundation.
So how is it that Sun only has 2 picks out of the 3 picks?
They get 3 picks out of the 5.
Okay.
So we elected 2. In fact, I was the first runner up actually.
Yeah.
So I'm not like that. Mostly because I'm too loud. So we have our 2 guys. Sun has their 2 guys, and then we have the 5th seat.
And,
You've got
but
a-
you're saying that Sun picks that 5th seat.
You've got
Yes.
a few more minutes yet. I just
Okay.
want Andre to come up and start setting up his stuff.
It's not a Sun employee though, is what he's saying.
It is not a Sun employee. No. There's supposed to be somebody from the outer open source world who's just going to kind of watch over us to make sure that we do this right.
Adult.
Sun picked but not employed.
Yeah, like I said,
Yeah, that'd be
the
nice.
fellow we brought in was from Apache. Roy Felding came on board. So the real point of OpenSolaris is to break down all the former barriers. between the users, the sysadmins, the developers, and Sun Engineering itself. If you go onto OpenSolaris.org, you can get on a mailing list and you can talk to the engineers who built the thing directly. There's no more abstraction of having to be a top-tier client or having to go through, Sun support or whatnot. You can open your own bugs. You can open your own RFEs. They even tag bugs in the bug database that are very simple to fix, called bite-sized bugs. You can search the database just for bite-sized bugs, and those are very simple bugs to fix that Sun won't fix. Just so that some of us who are trying to get up to speed on working on the Solaris code base can get in there and play with it and learn ourselves. So, if you're sold, one thing I wanted to go over real quick, the confusing options. There's a lot of different ways to get Solaris right now if you try to download it. You got Solaris 10, you got Solaris Express, Solaris Express Community Release, the OpenSolaris source, archives, and distributions.
Hey, exactly the same number as Novell releases.
Don't even get me started on that. I'm a sysadmin, right? So I'm thinking all the same things you guys are. Solaris 10 is fully supported. It runs hospitals, it runs the CIA, it runs the IRS, right? Solaris 10 is Solaris 10 is the operating system you run your business on, right? Sun stands behind it, fully qualified, everything's gone through it, and like I said, it's absolutely free.
Sun stands behind it. Are we doing the ads with the arrows?
Solaris Express. Solaris Express is a way to get updates to Solaris 10 before they happen. As a sysadmin, that allows you to prepare for it, look to implement features, test it, see what you think, and reply. Tell Sun what you think about it. Support is available for a nominal fee, a very small fee. Some people are running it in production now. And it's very stable, but again, it's not Solaris 10, right? It hasn't gone through all the QA and all that, so user beware. The community release is very similar to Solaris Express. It is, again, a full release of Solaris. It's got everything you expect, full installer and everything. It's released in parallel, though, with the OpenSolaris code base, which means you're getting the stuff that just came out of the internal code base 2 weeks ago.
So the master code base is actually internal, not external?
Internal, yes. We're working on bridging the two. One thing we do not want, and I don't think any of us really want there to be a single master code base on the outside. Because again, hospitals, airlines, governments run on this stuff. My business runs on this stuff, right? I don't want just anybody getting into it. I kind of like it being there, safe inside of Sun. I do want access to it though. Eventually, one thing we're working on is allowing a bridge between the two. So there's two different code bases. Sun keeps control of the code base that turns into Sun. I'm done?
One more minute.
Then there's the OpenSolaris source. You can download it off OpenSolaris.org. There's also a community site that I and Al Hopper run called GenUnix, which is completely uncontrolled by Sun. So if you're spooked by Sun and you want the source, you can download it there. You do not have to register for the source. You do not have to sign your life away. You do not have to agree to anything. Which was one thing we made very, very clear in the pilot, was no one's going to agree if you had to sign something for the source. It's released basically every 2 weeks, along with the internal build schedule. You can download the source. It's in a variety of packages. You can build it yourself. You can search it online via OpenGrok, which is our source browser. There is a GCC-ized version of the code, so that you can build it with GCC if you want. But generally we prefer Sun Studio for fairly obvious reasons, as well as the fact that it's the best compiler in the world. We also supply pre-compiled BFUs, which I don't have enough time to explain. BFUs effectively are copy.io images that allow you to install the operating system on top of what you're currently running. It's kind of like a really sad kind of quick upgrade, which is what they use internally for the engineers use for updating the operating system really, really fast. It stands for blazing fast upgrades.
Buck units?
And it is exactly that.
It's not what it does for us. It has another name.
We'll talk afterward. BFUs are what will happen if you build the source. One of the big things about the source is you're probably wondering, like, what does it take to actually build the source? It's not like Linux, where you sit there and you go, oh crap, which chipset do I have? I can't, is it the AMD 163 or 64? It's all completely modularized, right? Which is one of the things we love about Solaris. So you build it, you just effectively fill out a script, type make, it goes off, and 2 hours later you have a BFU. You BFU on top of your system and you're done. You can also download pre-compiled BFUs. And there's the distributions. Shillix, BayLINX, and Nexenta, which we're trying to make the names as difficult as possible. This is the first one done by York Schilling. BayLINX was the second to come out. It was done by a bunch of kernel engineers in India who were just raring to make their own distribution. And Nexenta, which is a bunch of guys who were Debian zealots but love Solaris, and finally had found Utopia. They put those together, they call it GNU Solaris. We put those in quotes because, you know, there's some problems. You can download live CDs for all of them.
Just pull them out for the big hook.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's it. So if you have any questions or anything,
Then we're going to whittle